My name is Sheila Arnold. I'm a professional storyteller and performer living in Hampton, Virginia, and we are thrilled to bring you a good luck night, not a bad luck night. Kind of stories you're going to hear tonight are just going to inspire and make you laugh as well. And sometimes, as Beth Moore says, that laughter is audible hope. So these are stories of hope. This event is the fourth in the virtual series Diversity 2020, Dynamic Voices for Change. Over the course of 5 weeks, the Muse is hosting readings, panels, workshops, and more that center and celebrate the voices of writers and artists of color in the Hampton Roads area and beyond. All of these events are free to the public and will be accessible on the Muse website after the live stream has ended. If you would like to support one of these fabulous events or the Diversity 2020 series as a whole, or donate to the Muse, there's a link in the description box and on the website. We're going to jump into some storytelling soon, but before we get started, I would like to tell you about the Muse Writer Center. The Muse Writer Center, we are based in Hampton Roads, Virginia, and as one of the largest literary centers in the country. We offer creative writing classes of all genres for all levels and ages. So you can check themuse.org for a full list of our online classes and workshops. And don't worry, it's not just writing classes. You can even take ukulele, and you can have even storytelling that you can take. The Muse, which is amazing, offers tuition assistance for all who need it. So don't ever let that get in the way of you wanting to be a part of this. We do not turn anyone away. We gave away almost $30,000 in tuition assistance last year because we didn't want anything getting in the way of someone who wants to write. And if you are willing to donate, let me tell you, that's one of the reasons you're donating, is so that we can give art to everyone. The Muse offers hundreds of free literary events each year: teacher readings, book launches, writing clubs, and much, much more. Coming this month, we have a lot of exciting events, including the next event in the Diversity 2020 series, a reading with Mira Dasgupta, the National Youth Poet Laureate, at 6 p.m. tomorrow, Saturday, November 14th. Now, we're about to get ready to do some storytelling and share about those things in our diversity as African American people that also have commonalities that all of us or many of us have had experiences on. And that's one of the joys about being able to tell these kind of stories, is to find the common things that we have. It is true that when you know somebody's story, it is very hard to hate them. And when you know somebody's story, it gives you a chance to actually mend old wounds and to reconcile. So it is with great excitement that I get to tell you the first story. My son this year, after George Floyd died, went to one of the marches. Then he came home or came to my house, and we talked a little bit. After we talked a little bit, he took a pause and then looked at me and said, "Mom, you know that talk that you gave?" Now, for those of you who don't know the talk, it's the one that African American parents give their children about how to act when the police come, and how to be silent and quiet, and to listen to the instructions and keep your hands at the right space and don't make any sudden movements. And I looked at my son as he said that, and I said, "Yeah, I know the talk." And he said, "I don't think you realize but that talk, in giving me that talk, it took away my voice." I was stunned. I literally recoiled back in my seat, and then I leaned up forward and, "I am so sorry, Chris. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." But he put up his hand. He said, "No, Mom, don't worry. Don't worry. It wasn't your fault, and I'm going to give that same talk to my own son. It's just that it tells me not to speak. I'm not allowed to ask questions of why a police officer would stop me, or allowed to even find out what it is that I can do to fix anything. I don't have any power. My voice is gone." When he said that, I thought about an old fairy tale written by Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Mermaid. The Little Mermaid just wanted the opportunity to walk on land and marry the one she loved. But in order to do that, she would have to get legs, and she was not allowed to do that. Except she went to the sea witch. And the sea witch told her she could get that. But in order to get that, she had to give up her voice. And Ariel said, "Without my voice, what do I have?" My son was saying the same thing. Without his voice, what did he have? And so today we will hear voices. Voices that have continued to rise up and to share and to give us hope, to make us laugh in the midst of, and to help us find our commonalities. For all of us need the right to use their voice. Our very first speaker is someone that is a wonderful friend, someone I love watching him perform, and that is Nathan Richardson. And I'm just making sure that I'm doing everything in the right order because, sometimes I get lost. Yes, Nathan Richardson. Very good. Nathan is a published author, a performance poet, and a Frederick Douglass historian and character interpreter. His poetry collections include Likeness of Being, 21 Imaginary T-shirts, and Voices from the Wombs of Wisdom. His work has been widely republished in anthologies, magazines, and newspapers such as the Channel Marker, the Cupola, Coastal Virginia Magazine, and the Washington Post. Nathan teaches a variety of workshops for emerging writers, and he is now the 6th year of the Frederick Douglass Speaking Tour, a living history performance in which he truly captures completely the physical and spiritual essence of the former slave, writer, orator, and abolitionist Frederick Douglass. You can see some of his work on television. You can find out more about him at his website, www.scpublishing.com. And most of all, I want you to know that Nathan is real. Nathan is the kind of person that when you hear him speak once, you want to hear him again because what he shares, you connect with. Presenting Nathan Richardson.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sheila. Shane, thank you so much. If anybody ever asks you how I got to be Douglas, you can tell her that lady right there, Sheila Arnold, forced me to do it, literally, because I wasn't interested at first, but it changed my life. So tonight, it's actually been a pretty rare thing over the last 6 years that I've even had time to write anything new. That's how much Douglas has impacted my life. But this COVID quarantine has put me in a position where I could go back and revisit some of my poetry and some stories. So I'm actually going to share a story tonight that is brand new. I mean, haven't even put it to memory. Ink still fresh on the page. And it's a story that I actually lived as a boy growing up in a rural community of Suffolk, Virginia. And I think what might be in contrast to some of the stories you hear tonight, even the opening that Sheila gave, is that simultaneously there are two separate worlds in the African American community. The summer that I'm describing to you was one that I lived until I was 19 years old because I wasn't allowed to go and visit New Jersey. My cousins in New Jersey. They can come to Suffolk, but you are not going to New Jersey. But this story is called The Asphalt Bites Harder Than a Dog. Dogs were mostly outdoor pets when I was a kid growing up in the country. We had many pets, but they all lived outdoors, still a little wild and mostly free. Those were the days before people warmed up to the idea of inviting their dogs and cats inside. We built our dogs very nice houses with big front doors, an occasional window, comfortable straw beds, and sometimes running water. But a dog in the house with people was still a pretty rare thing. I had a dachshund named Spot. He was a chubby dog with short legs and not much enthusiasm for chasing sticks, balls, cats, much less running cars or boys on bicycles. Most of our neighbors had dogs too. Next door, the Knight family had two German shepherds, King and Renly. They lived on long leashes and barked and snapped their chains whenever someone came in the yard. Only Mrs. Zaylee, with her soft-spoken voice, could calm their angry barks and growls. Right down the road, the Hunt Club had a whole pack of dogs, all in kennels, always barking and always ready to run a rabbit or a deer when the hunters gave them a chance. Those were specialty dogs, and lucky for us boys, they didn't like chasing anything on wheels. But the dogs at Mr. Ashburn's house, they were a whole nother story. 6 beagles who never saw a car or a kid on a bicycle they didn't want to chase. They lived their entire lives doing nothing but eating, sleeping, and waiting to chase a car or a boy pedaling a bicycle. Every time a car would come down the road, they would jump up, dash to the ditch, run the length of the yard, barking and snapping like they were going to bite off a wheel. But they all seemed to know they were no match for a fast-moving car. The dogs never went into the road to chase a speeding car. But when the farmers came by, driving slow, moving trucks and tractors, that's when the dogs would hit the road running, right up beside the wheels, barking, growling, and snapping their teeth. Individually, each dog was rather small, but altogether, they were one huge collective bark with 252 teeth. Did I mention these dogs like to chase boys on bikes? Absolutely. And to be honest, we boys like to chase the dogs as much as the dogs like to chase us. On any given summer day, at least once a week, the chase was on. Now, our gang of bicyclists consisted of 4 serious bikers, Kevin Gatlin, twins Tony and Anthony Lewis, and me, and sometimes 3 or 4 other boys who came along for the ride. We would ride all over the country and even down the road, and once we even rode all the way to town. That got us into some serious trouble, but we survived our punishment to ride another day. Now, running Mr. Ashburn's dogs was the highlight of the week and was another chance to prove whose bike was the fastest. You really had to have a fast bike and strong legs to get past those beagles before they saw you coming, before they jumped the ditch and were in the road pulling at your shoestrings. On the day of the chase, all the bikers would meet at Kevin Gatlin's house and prep their bikes. Solid tire pressure, tight seats, and absolutely no noise makers on the spokes or wheel, and stealth. This was very serious business. A loose handlebar or a loose chain coming off a sprocket could mean total disaster. After every bike was inspected, we would roll out 6 or 7 deep and pedal slowly the mile from Kevin Gatlin's house to Mr. Ashburn's. We would stop just before the dogs could see us or smell us. The command would come, ready, set, go, in a whisper, slowly pedaling all the way to top speed, trying to not make any noise. These dogs were veterans of the chase just like us, but we actually had a commanding lead in the series. Bikers 6, dogs 2. Only twice had the beagles been able to catch us to put a teeth on a tennis shoe. Only once in the whole history of the race had they ever managed to draw blood. That was the race when Toby Artis was wearing short pants and no socks. His left ankle needed 2 large Band-Aids and took a whole week to heal. Little did we realize this race in the summer of '72 would be the chase of all chases. We had done everything right. Fast bikes had a good start, and we caught the dogs after a big lunch with full stomachs. We caught them by surprise and they were slow to rise. By the time the fastest dogs could jump the ditch, 4 of our fastest bikers were past the cutoff and the other 5 bikers were close behind. It looked like we were going to count ourselves another victory. Then somebody, whose name we promise not to shame, on a bike in the front, broke the cardinal rule of the race. Never look back. He looked back. And it was just like that story in the Bible where they look back at the city of the Sodom and Gomorrah. No, we didn't all turn into a pillar of salt. But the 2 lead bikes collided, and we all 9 bikers ended up in a giant heap on the hot summer asphalt. It was a train wreck. It was a 9-vehicle pileup that would have made NASCAR proud. Tires and handlebars, arms and legs twisted all up in a mangled mess. Our injuries ranged from red road rash to 3 bruised elbows and 5 busted kneecaps. It took 5 whole boxes of Band-Aids to cover all the wounds, and we were picking scabs for 6 whole weeks. But believe it or not a single bite from a dog. You would have thought they would have torn us to shreds given the chance. The moment we had always feared, the thing that motivated the chase, evaporated like a myth into thin air. The dogs did not bite. They just stopped barking, slowed to a trot, made a few circles all around us, took a few whiffs of all the blood and human sweat, and went back to the yard and stretched out on the lawn. Just like that, the thrill was gone. We never chased the dogs again. And what did we learn from this whole tragic accident? The last of the 5 basic lessons every boy who grows up in the country needs to know. 1, a parakeet ain't smarter than a crow. 2, the bite of a mayfly is much worse than a mosquito. 3, a horse kicks harder than a cow. 4, a grasshopper jumps way farther than a frog. And 5, the asphalt bites harder than a dog. Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Nathan. Oh my.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Wow. That is
well, I tell you what, as soon as Willie Cordy is going to be my illustrator. And he's a fantastic artist from Norfolk State University, teaches at Norfolk State University. And I can't wait to see the images that he's going to bring out of that story. Yeah.
Wow. That's going to be a great book. And the only thing I have to add is I know exactly why those dogs did not bite you, because you were 9-year-old boys with sweat, and that smells so bad. All they did was take a and walk away. Okay, been there, know what they smell. No. Yeah. Nathan Richardson, extraordinary. Oh, love that. Oh, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Wow, isn't that fun? That's so much fun, y'all. I love that. Well, we keep the fun going because Lauren Hope is extraordinary. Now, I'm going to give the basic introduction here. She doesn't know I'm going to say at the end of this introduction, which is good. Lauren Hope is a registered peer recovery specialist, an advocate, and blogger. And in 2014, she survived a suicide attempt and lost everything. Homeless and unemployed, Lauren found help and hope through personal storytelling. She chronicled her story on her popular blog, Good Girl Chronicles, which led to a creation of her business and an inspiring motivational speaking career. Let me say that again, Good Girls Chronicles. Go and find it. For over 2 years, she has used her experience, strength, and hope to help people overcoming opioid addiction at local community service boards. She also runs her own media, consulting, and speaking business part-time. She is the producer of a storytelling show called Spark of Hope, which features powerful recovery stories. Hope is a leader in creating community events around mental health and addiction. And Lauren doesn't know that. But Because of her and what she talks about, in this past year of COVID, for the first time, I began to feel more comfortable to share about my own struggles with mental health as a middle schooler. And I will be forever grateful. And this is the first time Lauren's getting to know that she was a part of that journey. She's been a part of a lot of journeys, and she's also had some journeys of her own. And so we have Lauren Hope.
Wow, Sheila, thank you so much. And I needed to hear that for so many amazing reasons. Sometimes when you're in this space of being a mental health advocate, it can be hard to tell these stories. And then moments like that remind me why I do what I do. So thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I almost cried. So I have a blog called Good Girl Chronicles. In my mind, I was going to be the Black Carrie Bradshaw. I was branded as a goody two shoes my entire life. And so I wanted to talk about love, sex, and relationships through the eyes of a self-proclaimed goody two shoes. As a woman of color, I grew up in Mississippi, and all the women in my family were big breasted. And so when I was younger, I didn't understand why my girls weren't sprouting. So today I'm going to read to you something called the boob prayer. So my mom first taught me how to pray when I was about 6. Before we would go to bed, she would tell me to take my hands and put them together like a little teepee and close our eyes. I remember thinking at this time that this was some type of game that she and I would play where we would see who could close our eyes the longest. But then I realized that she was really focused on this moment. She was saying things to this God in the sky, and she told him everything. She told me that God had sent his son to save us. I really wasn't sure why I needed saving, but the idea of this God in the sky that loved me and sacrificed that for me was mind-blowing. I also liked the idea that he answered what we asked for. So, Mom, I can ask for anything I want, anything? Yes, you can ask for anything. God loves his children and he wants to help you. Well, what kind of help? Well, anything, she said, Lauren. I could hear, I heard then that God answered dreams and prayers. And at that time, I was like, God is this magical genie, and I am ready to cash in. I decided that it was time for me to really test out this theory about God providing for our prayers in a big way. Listen, friends, I wanted boobs. No, I needed boobs. I wanted to wear tight shirts and have the guys drool over me like Jessica Rabbit. Boobs were the answer. I was this quirky kind of tomboyish girl, and nobody was giving me any play. I'd hit this point in my life where, of course, boys were starting to matter, therefore looks mattered. And from everything I saw on television, the key to winning a guy was a huge set of knockers. So one morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I looked at myself side to side, lifted up my shirt, and I said, where are my boobs? When are they coming? This is pathetic. I was flat. I was sad. I was frustrated. They were barely noticeable. I would even suck in my gut, the things that we did then, girls, to try to make our boobs look bigger. And my mom was walking around with these ample double D. She didn't understand why I wanted big boobs so bad. Mom, I want boobs. You don't understand. All the girls in school are getting boobs. They're talking about bras. They're going to Victoria's Secret. I need boobs. Trust me, honey. They will come to you in due time, she says. She didn't understand. I needed boobs and I needed them now. I was stuck in this really awkward stage. I wanted to bust out. I wanted to be a girl. But I did see how troublesome Hooters could be. My mom was always complaining about her back pain. And after PE, I would see some of the busty girls have to struggle with these ugly grandma bras, or worse yet, put on 2 bras. I didn't care though. I needed boobs. So I did what any sensible Christian girl would do. I got down on my knees and I started to pray for my tatas. After a couple of weeks of kneeling and forming teepees with my hand and pleading with God for breast, nothing happened. Mom reminded me that God doesn't answer all prayers, and sometimes they go unanswered for our own good. But I was miserable. Why does God want me to be a sad, flat-chested woman my entire life? This prayer thing wasn't panning out, so I prayed more and longer. I have to tell you, friends, I wish I would have stopped praying. That boob blessing washed over me like a rain shower one summer. And what seemed like weeks, my little lady lumps had sprouted to these big mounds on my chest. Every week I'd try on different shirts and outfits. And at the time, I was kind of excited about it. The only problem was, once that blessing started, it didn't stop. It was as if my prayers had correlated to my bra size. It wasn't long before I was a double D in middle school. Mom always said to be careful what you wish for. I won't lie, friends, at first it was super fun trying out new bras and different colors and design. I was a real woman. My mom showed me how to secure my bra. And did I mention that the fellas were starting to notice? But then they started to really notice, to oogle, to drool, to fawn. And then it wasn't so fun anymore. And then I remembered praying that God would take the boobs away. But like Mom always says, be careful what you wish for. You might just get it. And that is the boob prayer.
Oh, Lauren, that is that is wonderful.
That's the moral of the story.
Oh my gosh, you tell that story brilliantly, girlfriend, brilliantly. Oh, don't worry, I'm gonna be calling you going, I need you on some other shows. That is wonderful. I can't hear you. You're on mute now.
From you, that is an amazing compliment. Thank you.
Oh gosh, that not just, I'm here to tell you that was wonderfully done, wonderfully done. And you know, the only thing is, I don't know if Nathan was turning red or not. I couldn't quite see, and so
Apologies.
Oh wow, that is wonderful. And I know there's some ladies that watched that were like, I am so relating. And then it all kept coming. I love that. That was
Like,
wonderful.
Jesus, take it back.
Hey, man. Oh, gosh. Did I tell you, she's amazing. She is just amazing. I love that. I love that. Really good reminders that be careful what we pray for. Amen. We wanted there to be a difference after the election. Be careful what you pray for. Mhm. All right, moving on. Not going to go there. I'm going to be good. Ah, goodness gracious. Amen. That's funny. I'm so excited. Guys, this has been so much fun already. But I get to introduce a non-Virginian. Both Nathan and Lauren are in Virginia. And Denise K. Page lives in Connecticut. She is a writer, speaker, and facilitator in the field of social justice, diversity and inclusion, and dismantling racism. More than a decade ago, Miss Keys Page, took a course at Southern Connecticut State University with Donald Davis, who's a Master Storyteller and Circle of Excellence awardee. Yet she only began telling stories publicly in 2019. As cries for social justice, racial equity, and examination of traditionally held practices grew louder, Denise was moved to blend her longtime commitment to social justice with her newfound passion for storytelling. She is the founder and executive director of Ubuntu Storytellers, Black and Brown Stories Beyond Victim and Saint. www.ubuntu, storytellers.com. And she goes to organizations and to businesses and helps them to see the implicit biases, to help them dismantle that racism is there, and then talk about and begin to learn from about diversity and how to be better inclusive. She's an amazing woman and has great thoughts and big dreams. Introducing Denise K. Page.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Thank you. And thank you. It's a joy to be on a panel with the two of you, and thank you for the great laughter. I'll hold on to that as I share my story. My story is it's an old story. It's brand new to me in terms of creation. So I will be mostly telling it. You may see me sneaking a peek at my notes. Okay. Okay. So I claim two towns when people ask me where I'm from. The city that I was born in in the suburb that my parents moved to when I was about 11 years old. Both the city of my birth and the suburb where I grew up left an indelible mark on me. Well, the time had come to show my granddaughter the town where I had grown up. She was familiar with the city in which I was born because that happened to be the same city that I chose to raise my son, her dad. But she had never really seen the place that I identified as the place of my becoming. And as she was 11, the same age I was when we were moved to suburbia, I thought it was a good time to give her just a peek at what my life had been at that age. You know, you get that feeling with age that you want your legacy to go forward and you really want to be known by something other than grandma and grandpa. You want your children and your grandchildren, your descendants to understand you as a full being who had a place of becoming. So it is that I take my delightful granddaughter on a tour of my hometown, the town of my becoming, the town that I lived in from the age of 11. I drive her to the center of town where the river meanders right through the center of town in front of the high school that I attended. It's the river that when it freezes in the winter, we all go ice skating on. It's the river that in the summer we sit on the benches and feed the ducks. It's a Currier and Ives painting. The river keeps meandering through the center of town and it ends where it gracefully falls in a waterfall to a basin right below City Hall. And during the holiday season, City Hall decorates the back of their building with tasteful lights that sparkle on the waterfall. Surely a slice of American life, of the American dream. And then I take my granddaughter to the house that I grew up in. As we approach the house, the brick front center hall colonial is still standing there. It is larger even than it had been when I had lived there. I noticed at least two additions. It had grown in the years since we had first been there. My parents were there for more than 40 years, and they had added a few additions. And I see my granddaughter looking at it, and she turns to me and says, Nina, this is the house you grew up in? Oh, yeah, but it wasn't that big then, I say to her. She looks at me and says, yeah, but still. And then I look, and of course, all the other houses in the neighborhood had grown too, because that's the suburban pastime. Every spring, people add on to their houses. It's a deck, it's a patio, it's an indoor jacuzzi, it's a great room. But in some way, shape, or another, those babies keep growing even as the families keep shrinking. After we leave our house, I take her to what is really the highlight for me of this town in which I grew up, and that's the beach. The town that I grew up in uh, has the longest swimmable coastline in Connecticut, 13 miles of beach, and most of them are private for residents and taxpayers only. But I can't wait to show her this beach. This is one of those places where my politics and my joy don't exactly intersect. We get to the beach and I throw open the car door and I present to her this great expansive beach, barely populated. She looks at it and wonders, where are all the people? Is this what it was like when you were a kid, Nina? Yes, I say to her. And she looks at me again and says, and you didn't raise my dad and Auntie KJ here because why? So I look at my 11-year-old biracial granddaughter, my granddaughter who was about the age that I was at when I first came to live in this town. And I'm wondering how much I can actually tell her about why I made the decision I made to not raise my children in the town of my becoming. So I simply say to her, oh, I wanted your dad and Auntie KJ to live in a community with more diversity. She looks at me with eyes stretched wide. She hears me, but I know she's not on board with me. I watch her looking at this space that had been my playground as a kid, and she knows where her dad was raised, and it's a fine neighborhood. But she wonders, why not here? Why not in the expansiveness of suburbia? You see, when I was a kid living in the city that I was born in, We had great times. The neighborhood that I had lived in to 11 had blue collar workers, pink collar workers, grad students, parents who worked full time, who were going to college at night part time, like my parents. And during the day, the Washington children and the Jefferson children and the children whose last names ended in vowels and the children whose last names ended in ski and stein, we all played together. We all went to school together. We went to bar and bar mitzvahs together. After catechism class, we played kick the can together. We had Kool-Aid sales together. We spent our lives together in a really intimate way where we got to know and appreciate one another. It wasn't the era of quinceañeras. That was one piece that we missed, but it's the kind of neighborhood that you know when you go back that celebrated with the same kind of enthusiasm. Well, when it came time, when word came that we were moving to suburbia, my friends, my city friends, my Black, white, Jewish, and Italian and Greek friends said, "You really want to go live with all those white people? Please, it's going to be exactly the same. I'll still have all of you as friends. We have lots of Black family friends. The only difference will be my bedroom will be bigger. We'll have a more expansive backyard for volleyball and touch football. I might even talk daddy into building a tennis court. Ha ha. And and we'll have more room to play when you come out. But it'll be exactly the same. And there will be that beach that I knew and loved. So my life was not going to change dramatically. Well, as I saw my granddaughters surveying the beach and looking at it like it was Disney World, I did wonder once again what I had deprived my children of. Because the town that I grew up in, the town with this beach that we're standing at now, this town was mostly middle class. There were a significant number of very wealthy people, and there were a little bit of a few unfortunate, looked down upon, pitied poor people. And almost all of those people were white. The statistics of the day say that less than 1/10 of 1% of the people that lived in that town were people of color. We, by we, I mean my parents, we were in the middle class sector and we weren't white. We were delightfully Black people. We had never wanted to be anything but Black people. We were Black people that walked in our truth, walked in our legacy, walked in our heritage, walked in our accomplishments, walked in our achievements, walked in our spirit, walked in our faith. We never wanted to be anything else. And it wasn't until I moved to this town that I realized there were people who thought that I should be apologetic for who I was. They didn't get that given a choice of anything, I would choose exactly this Black woman, even in America now, even in America then. There had never been any other choice for us. But it was in this town that I made the discovery that people weren't aware of that kind of pride and racial joy. And so, as my granddaughter's looking at me, and she says to me, "Well, you know, where you and Nina, where you and Daddy and Auntie KJ live, that's a nice neighborhood and everything, and I get the diversity, everything. But Nina, this is like Disney." I'm looking at her. She's from Burlington, Vermont, which is its own special brand of quintessential New England whiteness. But even with that, she finds something just extra captivating about this. And so she has me wondering, have I made a mistake? Did I deprive my children of some kind of a slice of American pie? And then in a flash, 50 years after the fact, I find myself sitting in my geometry class. In front of the room through the mist is the teacher, Mrs. B. There's a mist as I stand on the beach, and there was a mist when I sat in her classroom. I could barely hear her or barely see her as she pounded out the postulates and the theorems of geometry. I got none of it. I was surrounded at the tables by faceless and nameless classmates. I could name maybe two of them, not because my memory is failing me. I didn't know their names then. I never bothered to know them. It was there that I first realized that I was invisible and stupid. Now, Mrs. B, that wasn't really her name. Her first name did begin with B, and I don't call her Mrs. B for bitch, although I could. But I don't expose her name because I'm not exposing the guilty. But even as I make that choice, I wonder why. Why, even after all these years, I protect her. But I'm sitting in this class and I'm miserable and I'm failing. And then midterm grades come out and it's not a secret anymore. So I'm sitting at the breakfast table with my parents and my mother says gently, well, Niecy, honey, like, aren't you doing your homework? And look at her. I want to tell her, there's no point in doing my homework because I know we fooled some people for some time. People have thought I'm smart, but I'm stupid. But I don't want to hurt them, so I don't say that to them. Instead, I just sit there looking stupid. And then my father says, well, baby, you just can't fail geometry. You just can't do that. We're going to have to get you a tutor. And they do. And my tutor is the only other teacher in the school who also teaches advanced math, Mr. M. Now, I call him Mr. M, even though I want to say his name to honor him. But I don't say his name because I'm honoring a promise I made to him all those many years ago on our last day of working together. So I meet with Mr. M twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays for an hour after class. And amazingly, after like 2 sessions, all the joy of geometry I had expected to experience just unveiled itself. I love those postulates and theorem. You take one from here, one from here, one from here, one from here, you solve this big old problem. I began to think, hey, maybe I'm not so stupid after all. But as soon as I went back to class, to Mrs. B's class, I knew I was. Well, I continued with Mr. M, and as I said, he was unlocking the secrets to me. And after about 3 weeks, he said to me, now it's time for you to do those extra credit examples. Don't just do the assigned ones. I want you to do the extra credit, and we'll go over them. I looked terrified, but I did them and unlocked those two. And the first day we went over them, he made another request, a really strange assignment. When you do your homework tonight, he said to me, I want you to continue to do the extra credit problems, and I want you to solve all of them with at least 2 solutions. And when you get to Mrs. B's class tomorrow, when she says, now class, did anyone do the extra credit assignment? I want you to stand up, raise your hand high in the air at the same time, start walking purposely to the blackboard, don't look right or left, go to the blackboard, pick up the chalk, and start factoring out that baby on the blackboard just like you did in here in your homework. Mr. M, I can't do that. We get in trouble if we get out of our seats without being caught. He quieted me down with a wave of his hand. Just do as I say. So I go to class the next day and we're going through the homework. And then she says, now class, who did the extra credit homework? And she's looking at her 2 favorite students. And I took advantage of that moment of her glaring through me and away from me and jumped up with my hand high in the air so I couldn't be accused of not raising my hand and dashed to the blackboard and factored out the problem. And the whole class was looking at me like, who was I? Like my parents had looked at me when I handed them that report card, who's inhabiting my child's body. And when I finished, she looked at it and she said, yeah, that's right. And then she turned to the class, looking again at her 2 favorite students, and she said, so yes, that's one way to factor it. Now, who knows the other preferred way to solve this problem? Well, I started scribbling all over the blackboard and that's done. She looks at me. She doesn't look the least bit happy. In fact, she looks a little bit angry. There wasn't much she could say. I go back to my seat. This goes on for 2 or 3 days. By the 3rd day, I had caught on that whichever way I had solved it first, the other way would be the preferred way. And so I just went up to the board and I do it 2 ways, and it felt so damn good to beat her at her game. She said nothing complimentary this whole time. Another thing that began to happen was the kids in my class started inviting me to their lunch tables. I didn't have time for that. They weren't inviting me when I was invisible and stupid. I didn't need to be going now. Well, after about 3 weeks of running up to the front of the room and solving these geometry problems, I was sitting with Mr. M at our tutoring session, and he said to me, I'm so glad that you have learned to break through this geometry. And I know what you're doing in class because it gets talked about in the faculty lounge. And I want to share with you that the reason I said that I wanted you to stand up and raise your hand and walk to the board without looking right or left all at the same time is because I was afraid you'd be overlooked if you simply raised your hand. He said, and we're not, this is our last session together, Denise, because I can't take your parents' money any longer. You don't need me. You have broken through the barrier. And the barrier wasn't your intellect. It's Mrs. B's racism. But we never had this conversation. And I'm confident that you're going to be all right now. Well, maybe I was all right because I did end up acing geometry. But as I'm standing on this beach with my granddaughter, and just by stepping on the territory, all the pain of the invisibility and of feeling stupid washes over me unprovoked, uninvited. I wondered, am I really all right? Have I really made the right choice in not coming back to confront this? And had I made the right choice in keeping my children from having the rest of this experience? Because even though we were raised in a wonderful Ivy League city, I'm sure you know there were people there. So there was prejudice and racism. We didn't escape that. So we're standing there in the silence, and I'm still contemplating, did I make a good decision? And I'm contemplating it because my granddaughter's silence is accusatory. She really is still feeling that I robbed her dad of something. And I look at her, I sigh and take her hand. It's time for our scheduled tour to end. We walk back to the car. She looks back at the private, residents only taxpayer beaches with lust and longing. We get in the car and she's looking out the window as if she's saying adios to Disneyland. About 2 blocks from the beach community, the great big mammoth summer people, summer homes shrink to the modest blue collar homes. And the beautifully manicured lawns that have surrounded the beach homes, the beautiful manicured lawns that had kayaks on them and wild roses growing on the lawns and ambling up the porch. Well, the kayaks and the wild beach roses were replaced by sprouting Trump signs. They were everywhere, strategically placed like buoys to keep ships from banging up on shore. My granddaughter is still looking out the window longingly when she spots the Trump signs. And then, without affect and needing no response from me, she says, that's why. And I didn't respond. I knew she didn't need it. In that moment, I simply said, thank you, Mr. M. Thank you for having the courage as a white man to stand in the gap and confront the racism, the venomous racism of your colleague, and keeping a young girl who was about to fall desperately off the tracks on track and able to hold on to her self-confidence and sense of self-worth. And I prayed that for every Black and brown child, whether they're in a rural, urban, suburban, virtual, or live classroom, that there's at least one Mr. M to come and intercept the arrows and venom of racism. Thank you.
And Denise,
Mm,
Thank you. And we are thankful for Mr. M as well,
yeah.
because who knows what your story would have been had we might not even be hearing it right now.
Well, you no.
Is that
Yeah.
for a reason?
Yeah.
So
He
that's
was a
really
real
awesome.
hero.
Yeah, that is great. Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, these stories have just been amazing. I have loved it. I've loved hearing about riding on bikes and the and and the thrill being gone after the dogs catch up. I love the fact that we now know the prayer for boobs can go just a little bit too far. Yes. And we know that what may be seen on the beach is divine and wonderful sometimes comes with a bit of baggage along with it. And sometimes we need a hero. And so now I get to tell the last story. I told everybody what story I was telling. I completely changed it because, that's what happens with storytellers sometimes. My name is Sheila Arnold. I live in Hampton, Virginia. I'm a professional storyteller and performer. I used to travel around the country until COVID hit, and now I'm at home. And I'm understanding story in a way I never have before. In my family, growing up, sitting at the dinner table, was what we did every night. And every night we sat at that dinner table, and my parents would have conversation over the table with each other. And us three girls, all 4 years apart, would watch their conversation between each other. And when you got to a certain age, and don't really know what that age is, I think it was when you got to school, my parents would turn around at some point in time and say, "And what happened in your day today?" What was not acceptable was nothing. Never acceptable at our table. Nothing meant you were going to be grilled about something. So you just came to the table with something to say. You could get away with that. Now, my middle sister was the one that couldn't talk the most because myself and my baby sister talked so much that she could barely get a word in. But we were all still required to sit at that table and talk, and we did. You see, I was raised with a family of talkers. Some of y'all know that family. You get with the family reunion and you talk and you talk and you talk and you talk. See, I was with the Costners and the Richardsons on my mother's side. On the Arnold side, my father's side, they pretended like they talked less. No, they just talked more inside than they did outside. But with the Costners, it didn't matter where you were. Everybody talked. They talked a lot. As a matter of fact, you learned real quickly that it wasn't listening that was important. It was talking that was important. So you weren't required to actually listen to each other. You just had to keep talking. But at our dining room table, listening was important. And so we all were raised with stories flowing through us, stories of the day, stories of the past, stories all the time. It's how I grew. It's probably why I am a storyteller to this day. And then along came Jasmine. Now, Jasmine was a young lady from New York City, and I was already a mother, and Jasmine was just a little bit younger than my own son. And Jasmine had gone to Piney Woods boarding school, one of the last African American boarding schools in all the country. And it's a school where students could go and have a chance to really break out because their environment might be keeping them down. And here at this school in Piney Woods, Mississippi, close to nothing, was a place that you could have a chance to get a great education, and their rate of people going to either the military or college was near to 100%. And so she had gone down there, gone to school. And now she was having the opportunity to go to college. She got accepted to Hampton University and knew nothing about Hampton University. She was a New York kid that had been replaced in Mississippi, and it was still confusing. But my father was on the board of the Piney Woods School. My father, who is a Hampton Institute graduate, and now it's Hampton University. And so when her name at the graduation, he was there to speak. And when her name was called, it was told what school she would go to. And when she came across that stage, my father said, "Well, young lady, when you get to Hampton University, you call me." She took that for real. She came up after the graduation, got his phone number and business card, called him within 1 week and told him, my father, she was coming up and she needed a place to stay. And so Jasmine became the adopted granddaughter of my parents and my adopted daughter. We loved having her around, but our family was so different for her. The first Thanksgiving came. Now, Thanksgiving requires dinner, which requires, you got it, talk and story. We sit there with all the plates on the table, everything on the table, and we just sit at that table, and we could be at that table after we eat for another hour, hour and a half. And we're one of those pickers. So, the food's all on the table. So, if we get that second hunger in there, we just put more food on the plate and stuff like that and keep right on talking. It was her first Thanksgiving. She sat at the table and she did what she'd done all her life. You see, she grew up with a tray table and a TV. Eat your food. Now go home. So she was sitting at a different table. She heard all the talking, but it didn't mean much. She ate all her food, and then she got ready to get up, and I said, "Where are you going?" "I finished eating." "Oh, no, baby. No, baby. When we're here, we sit at the table and do what? We talk and we listen." Do I have to sit here?" "Yes." "Okay." So she took out her cell phone. "Oh, no, baby. Not your cell phone. We don't do the cell phone." "No cell phone?" "No cell phone." "Okay." She put the cell phone away. She was literally tapping the table, her legs, looking around, wondering why we would not stop talking. After 20 minutes, I looked at her and said, "You can go now." She was relieved, got on her phone, left the table, immediately started talking about how those crazy people kept her at the table where she couldn't talk on the phone for 20 whole minutes. But she kept coming around. She went to college and came to our house. And it would be her junior year when she sat at Thanksgiving. And this time she said, "Can I tell a story?" Everyone stopped. Of course she could. "Yes, go ahead." She told a great story about government cheese. It was lovely. But it wasn't the story that mattered. It was that she did it. And once she told it, my uncle at the table said, "Ha ha, girl, you got good stories. You got to tell them." She looked around. She was family now. She understood what story meant. Story meant family, community. It was a good thing. Jasmine's grown up a lot more now, and she's out of college and has her own business. She's working really hard, and she still tells stories, and she knows how to sit at the table and doesn't run away. It's been good to watch that. Last Friday was my grandson's birthday. He's now 9 years old. We didn't get to meet him until he was 3, and so we've loved getting the chance to have him as a part of our family. And he has been great when we have him on the weekends. For this birthday, we brought him to the house. He got to have a steak dinner. He only learned how to eat steak from my grandfather, so he was excited to have steak dinner, and he sat at the head of the table. For a few years now, he's sat at the table, and he also was one of those kids that, didn't do a lot of table talking. And so he would always want to get up, but he had to sit there, at least for 20 minutes. But this day on his birthday, he was the head of the table because it was his birthday. He had steak right there that he loved to eat and every food that he wanted. And then we started talking around the table. We talked about Christmas. We talked about looking for the presents your parents hide from you. We talked about going and finding them somewhere around the house. We talked about all the crazy things that happen at Christmas time with kids and presents. And then my grandson at 9 years old said, "I did that once before. I went to my mom, and I asked her if I could open the presents on Christmas Day, and she said yes. And I went downstairs and told my brother, and we opened the presents. And my mom came downstairs and she said, "What is wrong with you?" And I looked at her and I said, "I asked you if I could open presents." She might have been sleeping when I asked her that question. And I think she said yes. So I came downstairs and told June, my brother, and we opened presents. And she was not happy. We all laughed. My son looked at me and smiled. And I looked at my son, and then we both looked at my grandson. And I said, "Brooklyn, you told your first dinner table story." "Yeah, I did." And just like Jasmine, he's found home and community. Story does that. Thank you. Well, my goodness, we have had a time here. I love this, having a fun time. I hope you had a great time today. And I'm going to ask that in just a moment, for all the storytellers, our presenters, to unmute in just a second. And I want to thank them so much. I'm so honored to be here today, and these stories were just so great. And on behalf of the Muse Writer Center, a big thank you to all of you who are watching this. It is such a joy to be able to share art with people from all over the world. If you'd like to donate to support the Muse or become a sponsor for Diversity 2020, click the link in the event description. And remember, the next event in this series is a reading by Meera Dasgupta at 6 p.m. tomorrow on Saturday, November 14th. If you're interested in our upcoming classes, workshops, and events, head on over to themuse.org. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay safe, stay healthy, stay creative, and have a wonderful, wonderful night. And make sure that all my folks are unmuted so that we can say a big goodbye.
Good night. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everybody.